Hello, everyone. Thanks for giving us your time today for VR Download. I'm Ian Hamilton in New York, joined by David Heaney from London as we discuss the next steps in personal computing. We're wearing Quest 3 headsets today with last generation Meta avatars. We're using hand tracking and built-in microphones. And we've got a little bit of feedback I need to turn off on my computer here. Do not pass through my audio. Sorry about that. Yeah, we've got Quest 3 avatars, hand tracking, built-in microphones, and I want to say thank you to our patrons for supporting the work we do over on UploadVR.com. That's XR Developer News, Podum, the developer of Smash Drums, Holonet, next page, Mike Manzano and Richard Meller. I was just chatting with everyone over in the comments. Hello, everyone. We had someone on our last show from Antarctica watching us and sent in a photo of this show being watched from Antarctica. So we always love seeing where everyone is watching from, and that was a big one for us to see. That was amazing. Thank you for sharing that with us, but keep sharing that in the comments. David, what do we have today?
Hello, everyone. So our main topic today at the end of the show will be Bigscreen Beyond 2. And we actually have Bigscreen's founder in the comments here making a very funny comment asking whether it was a slow news day. And no, it was definitely not. Yeah. So he's not only not a slow news day, but not a slow news week either to talk about today. Before that, again, our end discussion, our big screen beyond. We have some other things we're going to discuss first. We'll discuss Varjo XR4 now requiring a $2,500 per year subscription for advanced mixed reality features. We will discuss Metallica coming to Apple Vision Pro, the Metallica concert experience. I tried it over the weekend. Ian tried it last week. Okay, apparently my audio is not good. Apparently it's better again, according to some people, so I'm just going to continue. So if you didn't get that, we're going to talk about Varjo XR4 requiring a subscription for some features. Then we'll talk about Metallica on Apple Vision Pro. I loved this over the weekend. Ian tried it as well, and he really liked this. It's the best immersive video yet. We will then talk about some Quest SDKs. We'll talk about Microgestures, thumb microgestures coming to the Quest SDK, as well as, of course, the bombshell feature that would have been our big topic today had Bigscreen Beyond 2 not launched, Quest's Passthrough Camera API releasing experimentally, meaning developers can play with it but can't yet ship it on the store. We'll then talk about Snap Spectacles getting GPS support so it can more easily integrate the real world, and also having multiplayer for Peridots from Niantic. Then we will talk about LG. LG ceasing its XR product efforts. Okay, getting some confusing comments here. Some people saying stream dead, some people saying still working for me. Refresh the stream if you ever have issues before you post in the comments, just so we know whether it's on our end or YouTube. Just hit refresh at the top of your PC. So we'll then talk about LG ceasing its XR product efforts, but continuing research and development. Then we will have a Meta CTO Andrew Bosworth section, because Bosworth has been talking a lot on X this week. He has said that he loved and hoped to keep the Oculus brand, which is obviously crazy if true, because our assumption has been, and the kind of operating based on what he said, is that it was a decision by him to kill the Oculus brand. So that's kind of confusing. He also responded to the controversy around using mixed reality to mean both MR and VR. And he had some spicy words there for the community that you may not like. We'll then have a short discussion about what Meta revealed at GDC this week. They have claims about how, according to their data, which you can see our article for details on, their open store and Worlds push didn't affect spending. And they also say that Quest headset usage in 2024 is up 30% over 2023. So people are using their headsets more, according to Meta, and they haven't reduced spending. In fact, overall spending, according to Meta, has increased. They also reiterated that, and I quote, "We are still investing massively in VR gaming and don't plan to stop." Then we will discuss Bigscreen Beyond 2. And if you haven't heard of it, if you don't know what that is, check UploadVR.com right now.
All right. Well, now I'm talking. Let me know if you're hearing Ian. And David is over there on the PC checking the status for him as well. So we'll find out what's going on with the stream. And just like he said, refresh it and then update in the comments after you refresh if you're still having problems. That's the easiest way to be clear on what's happening here, on whether it's on our side or your side. Yeah, and we've got that right in the comments. I see everyone out there. Arlen, great to hear from you. A lot of regular viewers, lots of new viewers, and I do see the creator of Bigscreen out there in our comments. So thank you for tuning in. We sometimes have Guy Godin from Virtual Desktop in our comments. Very cool to see Bigscreen out there representing. They just launched their embargo right before we came out here. We'll get into that later in the show. I just wanted to mention that he's in the audience out there. If you have questions about Bigscreen Beyond, we don't know how long he'll stick around, so put them out there. Try to get them answered while he's there in the comments, and then we can talk about that in that part of our show. But I wanted to point that out to you. David, are we live on the internet, and are we ready to talk about that first subject?
Yes, we are. I'm very confused to what some people might be experiencing. YouTube says right now, I can see in front of me, stream health excellent. OBS is showing no issues. So yes, please, before you post in the comments, not to be rude, but refresh in case it's just a YouTube CDN issue going on here, because otherwise we have to stop our sentences and wonder, are we still alive? And, I'll keep an eye on the stream health in case that becomes an issue. But it's
what was cool, David, though, is like I'm getting confident enough in ourselves inside here. I was able to just point to the comments, right? How cool is that, right? I'm in the United States and I'm pointing to your comments in England, and you could have ignored me and kept going, right? I was just like, hey, just so you know, that's what they're saying out here. So we're learning how to handle this ourselves too.
Yeah, I think the audience is realizing, refresh. But yeah, we have these tablets we have are real. They're real in VR things. These aren't overlays. They are networked. He can see my comments. I can see his, et cetera, et cetera. Let's get into the show, because we do have some big topics today. We obviously all want to get to that Bigscreen Beyond 2 discussion at the end. But we have some things that we do want to discuss first. And so our first topic, if I can find it here, is Varjo XR4. So if you're not familiar with Varjo and what XR4 is, they're a Finnish startup. They make ultra high-end VR and mixed reality headsets that are mainly for big enterprise companies and governments who want really high resolution. So Varjo offers, of the headsets that you can actually buy, the highest central angular resolution at like 52 pixels per degree. So for context there, human eye is pretty much 60. A Quest headset is like mid-20s. Apple Vision Pro and Bigscreen Beyond are in the low 30s. That's the kind of context you get there. So 52, way beyond that in the center. The problem, of course, is that they are very, very expensive. The base model of the XR4 costs around $4,000, and the model that has autofocus cameras, so the mixed reality pass-through cameras will autofocus based on your eye tracking, is $10,000. And I actually went hands-on with this last year. I found that the VR quality is stunning. It's a really great VR headset. Arguably, like if you're just talking about virtual reality, not pass-through, arguably the best, because that angular resolution is just incredible. And if you are, an enterprise or government that needs to read small text, for example, there are car companies who are like prototyping their car interior by having you kind of sit in this in VR, and you need to read every tiny detail of the dashboard. They want to know, what size do we want to make the font on your fuel display or something like that. That's very important. I actually found the pass-through was disappointing though. Obviously, the software may have changed since then, but at the time, I didn't find it to be better than Quest 3 or Vision Pro, and in some ways, actually worse than Quest 3 and Vision Pro. So, at the time, I said, remarkable, breathtaking VR quality, disappointing pass-through. All that context aside, what they're doing here now is they're introducing a pro version of their base software, the software that's required to use this, that will require a $2,500 per year subscription, or $5,000 for a lifetime license. And this will be required for advanced mixed reality features like chroma key, green screening, blend control mask, developer access to the pass-through cameras, pass-through post-processing shaders, environment cube maps for realistic lighting of virtual objects, like Apple Vision Pro gives you for free, 3D reconstruction from the headset cameras, and programmatic control of pass-through settings. It'll also be required to use third-party tracking systems other than the built-in inside-out tracking or SteamVR base stations. So generally, I think for the enterprise and government users that are actually using those advanced features, this isn't going to be a big deal. And Varjo does say that for existing purchases of XR4, you won't need this. But for new purchases starting from March 25th, that's when this will be needed. So next week, new purchases. If you're already spending $4,000 to $10,000 on a headset and you're one of these type of users in aerospace and government and defense, you may be a little annoyed, but I don't think this is going to be a deal breaker. What it may be an important thing for is Varjo, who, this suggests to me that they are potentially struggling financially and need to bring in some extra revenue.
I see Pip's comment out there. They've been disappointed with pass-through on the XR3 and 4. Well, they're saying there's such a letdown when the VR is so good to see pass-through that is in such a different place. So we definitely understand that there's a big path there for improvement, and we want to recognize that, right? Like, it was a big step forward with Apple Vision Pro, but it seems like everyone else has woken up and gotten pass-through, really improved, but there's still such a huge gap between that and what we really need out of pass-through. I love UEVR saying one day Varjo equivalent headsets will be so much smaller.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with that commenter. It is every headset so far that has passed-through, you see a big downgrade in what you see from the real world versus the virtual world, right? It's striking how in Quest 3 in mixed reality, you can see like these sharp virtual objects that are 25 pixels per degree, and then the pass-through is like 18 pixels per degree. It looks like, in theory, this should be great because Quest 3 has 4 megapixel cameras, Apple Vision Pro has 6.5, and this has 20 megapixel cameras. But it turns out that just like cameras, like with digital cameras that we all learned through getting misleading marketing of 100 megapixel camera, it must be better. It's not just about the pixels. There's a lot of other factors at play. The aperture of the sensor, the size of the sensor. And if you look at these things, you can actually just guess by looking at these cameras and saying, these are no bigger than the sensors that are in Vision Pro or Quest 3. What we need for really good pass-through is bigger sensors. And that's what Somnium VR1 actually did, the PC VR headset. That's still the best pass-through I've ever tried, Somnium VR1. And they just said, why is everyone using these little phone sensors? Take a giant, big-ass, professional camera sensor and bring in more light. That's the trick here, because otherwise, in anything but ideal conditions, you get graininess and loss of detail.
I was walking around Central Park with James out there in our audience. He's in the New York area, and I was telling him I was imagining 3 iPhones on stands out in a park there, set up like lighthouse base stations, sharing all of their mapping data over like a direct Wi-Fi connection, and creating a little mesh network there for a protected paintball or sporting space. I would love to see that kind of path ahead, but I see let's see, Guy Godin saying it's the processing of the video data that's the bottleneck, as in sending it over to be rendered right here.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the bottlenecks too. And there are companies that are looking at developing like custom PCIe cards for this, and custom stacks all the way from the headset. VR engineers, the people that make Xtal, Virgineers, I think is how you really pronounce it. They're looking at developing like a really high-end Xtal headset with custom everything, from the chip that processes the cameras on the headset all the way to the cable that sends it to a PCIe card that, puts it onto the PC. So yes, that is absolutely true. The biggest limiting factor in some ways is how you process it, but the lenses and the sensors matter too, especially for low light. Doesn't matter how much post-processing you put on. If you've got a grainy image that the sensor just isn't capable of handling, you could throw all the processing in the world at it and nothing's going to help.
I think it's probably a good time to transfer to our second subject and move us right along here to talk about the Metallica thing, because it's a different subject, yet it's the same. How do you get all the pixels that are captured by a sensor all the way back out the other end to your eyeballs. And Metallica's concert here on Apple Vision Pro shows that Apple has ironed out that process really, really, really well. And I actually put a question out there to the creator of Bigscreen, and we'll see if I can get him to respond out there in the comments in public to our audience of what's the likelihood we could see Apple immersive media carried as like a channel on Bigscreen. It would be an amazing overlap of content with hardware. And I just wanted to put that out there. David, do you want to break this down for people? Anything else that I like? Any context that I missed here?
Yeah, well, I first want to say I think it's extremely unlikely that Apple makes its immersive video available on PC, right, or on any other platform. It's a selling point of Vision Pro. It's the kind of content that they want to push the headset with. Maybe one day when these things are commodity and there's headsets everywhere and the market's entrenched, you see in the same way that they've brought Apple Music and Apple TV over to Android, that they bring this to other headsets. But yeah, Darshan, the founder of Bigscreen, is agreeing here that there's absolutely no way this is going to happen anytime in the next many years. But I mean, what I want to say about this is incredible. Your review of this said it was incredible. The Verge said this is the best Apple immersive video. I agree. This is so good that if you don't believe in immersive video, this could change your mind. So this, just to be clear, this isn't only on Vision Pro headset owners. There are 3 songs in this from their live concert tour. But if you go into an Apple store, you can try one of those songs. They are demoing an Apple store for free. You can just book and go in, and maybe if it's not busy, you can just walk in, I guess. Please do so if you don't believe in this, if you don't have a Vision Pro. It's just so good. From following them as they come out of the tunnel into this enormous stadium to actually being on stage and feeling that music when you have good earphones in, I was blown away by this. I found myself like multiple times going, wow, out loud. And I think one of the things that makes this really work is that a lot of it is in black and white. And a lot of it is in like a dark stadium where it's illuminated by all of the small points of light. So the field of view isn't really a big thing. You may notice this in VR before, that if you're in like a completely dark tunnel and you're seeing like some virtual objects in the distance, it's the same as if you had a full human field of view, right? Because it's dark there anyway. So your brain kind of thinks, wow, I'm actually completely immersed in this. So there were times in this concert where the field of view, even though on Vision Pro I've criticized so often that narrow vertical field of view that sucks. You know, we'll talk about Bigscreen Beyond 2 later and how it's improved field of view. Well, Apple's still, 10 or 15 degrees behind vertically. Every part of this was just great. There were a couple of little flaws, right? So the camera that was right beside the drummer was a little bit too close, so it was stretched at the side. Occasionally, people were throwing these giant inflatable balls in the crowd, and it would whack against the camera and bounce it. But yeah, you could see even the stage people trying to like push them away. But yeah, this, as you said, it sells VR, and I say this sells immersive video.
Yeah, and I even want to step beyond that, and this is I think the one that I want to speak to our audience about and understand. You're going to see some different type of reporting, I think, on UploadVR.com. I would love Darshan to take the space of our comments to expand on what he sees people using his headsets for when we get to that, so we can read out what you say out there about how you see people using your headsets, what specific avenues you're starting to see people use them on. This was motivating me to increase my relationship. Like I want to go see Metallica in concert in the real world now after I've seen this in VR. And that's not intuitive to anyone out there until you cross this barrier. And I heard a quote this week as well from the creator of the holodeck that's in Austin, where they're selling real estate. And, we had to cross a barrier here. He was echoing this whole idea where it had to get good enough for this entire media type to be interesting. And just fantastic experience. I'm seeing people in our audience go to an Apple store. I recommended this immediately to family. Go see it. And I'm really curious for the people who are like sort of trying to understand what is the future of media. Well, like, this was a project that required someone to go and put 14 cameras in place around a stage to pick the exact right spot for it. And that employed people on this production who got paid to put those things in place. And obviously, Metallica is one of the biggest bands in the world. They're getting some money, and they're part of this relationship with Apple. So there's there's money to be made in this type of production, is what this proves to me after so many years of just false starts.
Yeah, I very much so agree. I think this shows that this kind of content, people would pay for this. Like, not just VR enthusiasts, but this is good enough that a regular person might pay. I don't know what the exact amount would be. Maybe it's $10, maybe it's $20, whatever, to have this virtual experience for an entire concert. And that could mean, maybe you can't afford the full ticket price. Maybe you aren't able to, for various reasons, physically travel or attend a concert like this, but you'd love to. You can now do it from home. Or maybe you have been to the concert, but you loved it so much that now it's off to other countries and you want to experience it all over again. There are so many things like this. If you're not a Metallica fan, you may be thinking, I don't care about this, but you just have to make that one leap of imagine it with your favorite band, right? Imagine your favorite band, and it's not like just listening to it on headphones. It's not like watching a music video. You're really there at the concert. And yeah, this is, I'm so bullish about immersive video and immersive concerts in general after trying this. And I see multiple people in the comments that are agreeing that this is just an incredible experience.
We just got a donation from Patrick out there saying that they usually listen to us in audio form, and we have a lot of silent listeners out there that speaks to. So thank you for watching us from wherever you are in the world, and we appreciate you being on this journey with us. And Darshan is one of those people who have been on this journey with us for a very long time. Guy Godin has been out there on this journey with us for many, many years. It's wild to see so much innovation happening continuously from all of these people for so many years. It's really heartening, and it's thank you all for tuning in today and for being part of this conversation. I can't wait to talk about Bigscreen Beyond, but we've got to get through a couple other things, and this is something we can't not talk about, right? This was incredible. This will change your mind. I put it in my article. People will go into this. They will go into Apple stores. They will listen to one song, and then they will buy an Apple Vision Pro. And yes, there aren't a lot of people who are in the overlapping area of two circles where I've got $3,500 to spend, and I love Metallica. But if you're in those two circles, you're probably going to make that purchase because of how awesome it is.
For the people who aren't, you're still going to see this and go, wow, this is something I didn't know was possible. And then years down the line, right, Apple Vision headsets become $2,500, $1,500, $1,200, whatever they go to. And at some point for each person, with immersive concerts being one of them, immersive sports, all of the other kind of things, having your MacBook as a giant ultra wide virtual display, all of these things will come into people's purchasing decision. I don't expect that many people are going to walk in here and put $3,500 in. Some, of course, will, but a huge number of people will say, I want a headset one day, and that's what matters. This is like marketing for the future. So the one constraining factor here we always have to point out is that this is still very expensive kind of production. Making these immersive videos is still time expensive and cost expensive. But what we expect to be launching very, very soon now is, as we talk about so often on this show, this Blackmagic immersive camera that was developed in partnership with Apple that is $30,000, which for a studio that produces high quality media is actually not a lot of money for what it does for them. And at that point, this is when we expect this to really proliferate, because not only Apple will be able to make this, lots of different studios will be able to go and buy a camera or two or three and start producing this. And they're also, integrating this into their video editing software, DaVinci Resolve. So this will be something that lots of creators out there have the tools and equipment to use. And as James O'Loughlin points out in our comments, other studios or smaller creators can rent them just like they already rent cameras for productions.
Yeah, so Biggs is pointing out this is well within reach for VFX studios in LA. And if you've got a place like New York or London or Los Angeles, you can have a rental location that rents these out for a day, and you spend a limited amount with all of your talent all gathered together to film something like this. Uh, we've seen 360 cameras for years. We saw companies come and go after having raised millions upon millions and upon millions of dollars to try to make those ideas work. And it's amazing that we've come full circle. Did you? What was what we have? I have to point this out for people that aren't aware about how Apple Immersive Video works. There is a way to watch those videos in the shared space with another avatar, a photorealistic avatar standing there right beside you. So you can take this immersive 180-degree video, flatten it down into a large, very large 3D frame floating over there, and then be standing there with another avatar, another persona avatar that Apple makes, and watch the video that way. And it's a really cool transitional space if you need to um, if you need to like do something else for a minute and pass through, looking at mixed reality, and then go back to the fully immersive view with your friend. And it was a really smooth, cool experience. And I actually watched it with James out there, and it was I put it on Blue Sky. You know, this was a top 5 VR moment for me, and the top 5 is going to keep changing going forward as more content is made in this category.
Yeah, I hope they bring the full immersive experience to spatial personas as well. You know, what you're referring to, it's cool. It brings it from an immersive experience down to a normal 3D rectangle. It's like minimizing, I guess, for temporary. For me, it loses the real effect of being there, though. And I understand the social aspect, but I want to feel like I'm there. And that's why hopefully in Vision OS 3, they let you do both, right? It would be great to have James floating beside you while you're in the giant immersive experience at some point.
Hello to
But
Caleb of NYC. Thank you for becoming an UploadVR member. That is awesome. And I see James doing the fingers out there. Yeah, that was awesome. All right, let's talk about our Quest SDK section and uh, keep hitting that like button. Get more viewers in here. This is a good show, and the last section of the show is a good section to bring in new viewers who might have a PC at home, might be a PC gamer, have a recent NVIDIA graphics card. We're going to have a nice discussion at the end of this show about how that differs from the Quest ecosystem, and we don't often get the time and the space to have that conversation. Well, we're going to have that time and space for it today, and that's a good time to share this link out to others, get them in here. You ready to talk about this Quest section?
yeah, let's talk about Quest SDK stuff. So we're going to talk about 2 things today, 3, I guess, in total. Thumb microgestures, improved audio to expression, and the pass-through camera API. So let's start with thumb microgestures. This is a new feature in V74 of the Meta XR Core SDK, and it uses controller-free hand tracking to detect your thumb pressing and swiping on the side of your index finger like this, like you can see me doing right now. So you essentially get a clickable D-pad that's also a swipe pad, kind of like the D-pad on the Steam controller. If anyone in the comments or any of the viewers right now remember that thing. So you get to swipe down, swipe forward, swipe left, swipe right, as well as click on different positions on your index finger. And so Meta's kind of example use case for this is that you can enable teleport locomotion with swipe turning. So you point with your hand and then click to teleport, as well as swipe left to right. And that means that, you know, the example here is given as a virtual museum experience where maybe you don't want to have to pick up the controllers just to walk around the museum. You want to kind of sit there with your hands free and just appreciate the spatial or traditional art that you're experiencing, maybe with someone else as an avatar, whatever that is. How developers use this is up to them, of course. They could use this to make navigating a UI more easy. They could use it for some sort of crazy game mechanic. The point is that it's a lower calorie, lower exertion way to navigate around with hand tracking compared to either physically reaching out and pointing and touching stuff, which can give you gorilla arm over time, right? Your hands and arms get strained from that. As well as obviously having to like point and pinch all the time is also a bit more straining. So what we did note about this is that it seems quite similar to what Meta is planning to do with their SEMG wristband, their neural wristband that's supposed to be the input method for the AR glasses and potentially the HUD glasses as well. So it's possible that with these thumb microgestures, developers will be able to kind of prototype on that because it's the same kind of idea. Obviously, with the wristband, you don't have to be in vision of the cameras at all, right? You could have your hand in your pocket, in your jacket pocket while you're on the bus or the train and be navigating these interfaces using your kind of virtual D-pad that you've created from this. But on Quest, you will have to be within view of the cameras.
Yeah, I've mentioned this before, but I've been testing the Tap XR band and obviously the Apple Watch and other watch apps on both Android and Apple-based wearables have basically like air mouse capabilities where you can translate your movements, and then Apple added a double pinch gesture for answering calls on the latest watches. They're already moving towards a space on the watch areas where you're having a bunch of like all day gestures over on the wristband, and it's all moving in the same direction. The question is what happens to sort of like usage in VR. How many more hours per day do we start using a VR headset when you have this kind of interface available to you all the time?
Yeah, for sure. And I think in the more immediate term, what this means is that more apps that currently use controllers simply because they need those thumbsticks can now kind of get a virtual thumbstick. And, this museum example, again, is just a perfect example of that. So the other thing that comes with the V74 SDK is improved audio to expression. And if you're not familiar with what that is, basically since 2015, there has been the Oculus Lip Sync SDK, and that's what we're using right now. We don't have face tracking, but you can see my mouth moving. And that's because we feed in the microphone audio to this Oculus Lip Sync SDK, and it comes up with some plausible mouth movements. And it's pretty good. It's remarkably good for what you might expect if you'd never heard of this technology. But recently, in the past few months, Meta launched a replacement, the Audio to Expressions SDK. And as well as the lip movement, it also can do the upper face muscles. And you can go to our article to see an example of this in video. And so with the V74 SDK, they say they have really improved the underlying AI model behind this to improve all aspects of emotional expressivity, mouth movement, and the accuracy of non-speech vocalizations compared to earlier models. So once we upgrade our avatars, we'll certainly look into using this because this would be ideal for this show. And the remarkable thing for all you developers out there is Meta claims that this audio to expression SDK uses less CPU than the old model. And I would suspect at least that that's probably because they're doing some of this on the NPU of the Snapdragon chipset, the neural processing unit, because after all, this is a machine learning model. So unless there's anything you want to say about that, I think we can go on to pass-through camera access.
Yep, let's move through these quickly as we can, even though that's sometimes a false promise out there to our audience. I think we are pretty focused today on trying to get to that big screen conversation. So yeah, just move on, David.
Depends if we talk about walkabout mini golf with Ray-Ban Meta glasses on.
No!
and of course, driven by Nintendo Joy-Cons.
Yeah. I tried to schedule myself for the Switch 2 demos here in New York, and I got rejected from the lottery there. So I don't know when I'm going to get to try out I was going to go there in my Quest 3 and film it from the Quest 3 and just plug the Switch right into the Quest 3 and see what happens. But I got to get an appointment on the schedule before I can do that.
Jack P is saying to stop it, and James O'Loughlin, they're both saying that they're already too drunk for this. Please don't play the VR download drinking game. I want to say again, we do not encourage getting very drunk every time we say certain words. Don't do it. So let's talk about the pass-through camera API, which is arguably the biggest developer feature that has come to Quest, not just this week, not just this year, but arguably ever. because this really changes what developers can build. We've been talking about it for recent episodes because there's been teases of it being implemented. Meta, shipped the actual headset camera permission that you need to grant for an app to use this a few weeks ago. So it's already been there lying dormant, but now apps can use it. Not on the store yet. This is what Meta calls an experimental developer feature. That means developers can play with it. They can distribute an APK over, Discord or email or whatever. They can put it on SideQuest.
Anywhere except through Meta, right?
Yes, anywhere except on the Meta Horizon store. You cannot actually put this in an app yet. They've done this for a bunch of different features in the past. It's pretty normal for Meta. They, put it out there, make sure there's nothing crazily wrong with it, and then a few weeks or months later, you can use it on the store. So if you're not familiar with what we're even talking about here, this lets applications actually access the pass-through cameras. Not just use pass-through as a background, which is what all mixed reality apps on the store do today. The developer just overlays their virtual objects on the real world. They do get access to this 3D scene mesh that you scan when you set up your Quest 3 or 3S. They can use, hand tracking as a just sequence of like skeleton positions for each finger. They don't actually physically see your hands. Now they see the entire world. So what developers can do with this is only limited by what computer vision models can either run in real time on the Snapdragon XR2 Gen 2 chipset, or which cloud-hosted image recognition models they're willing to pay for. You can either run QR code tracking and detection algorithms in real time in the headset. You could run object tracking and detection like you see here. You can do a kind of frosted glass shader to kind of get the translucent UI effect of Apple Vision Pro. You can, in this interesting example, pick colors out from the real world, right? A color picker where you pick something in the real world. These are just some basic initial examples. You could also hook it up to GPT-4 or, Gemini or Claude or whatever AI model that has vision. As long as it has vision capabilities, you can feed in an image from the pass-through cameras. As I've said before, I expect that we're going to see some really innovative use cases from developers, just like every time developers get powerful new tools in this industry, we see them come up with ingenious things that us ranting away on this show could never actually come up with. And we're really excited to report on some of the things developers do with this. One of the typical examples people are excited about is virtual board games, where you can scan a board game and have the virtual objects pop on without having to do any kind of manual alignment.
Yeah, I was dreaming about this of what's the right gameplay model. So I've got a little like miniature pocket version of chess, and it's magnetic, and you can fold it up and have your game inside this magnetic little folding thing, and then you roll it out, and then you've got your game right there. What's the model? How do you do this situation where you're holding this magnetic little game of chess in your hand? The AI model, the game you're playing recognizes the state of the game right here. You move a piece from one spot to another, and then the other player of this game somewhere else out in the world gets a notification at that exact moment that you've made that change on your version of the board. You put the game back in your pocket, and you go about your day on glasses or a headset, right? And then you get another notification on your headset in a few minutes that you need to pull out your board and see, and it actually shows you a little outline of what the other player's move was, right? And then you move their space into the thing. How does that work on any board available? Well, you need this feature to do it.
Yeah, it's a great example. And as you've said in the past, other examples include instruments. The piano playing app today on Quest requires a lot of manual alignment. Well, now they can just run a computer vision model to detect the position of the keys. A few technical notes we do want to note here. The pass-through camera stream is provided at 1280 by 960. And per camera at 30 frames per second with a latency of about 40 to 60 milliseconds. So that means what this isn't capable of is real-time fast object tracking. You're not going to use this to track a tennis racket or a fast-swinging golf club or something like that. This is going to be for objects that either are slow-moving or static and just doing kind of basic analysis of the environment. Maybe in future, Meta will provide the grayscale tracking cameras with their fisheye lenses and low latency. at 60 or 90 or whatever frames per second, and that would help developers do custom fast object tracking. But for now, that's not what this is about, just to be clear. Still a lot of possibilities though within those technical alliances.
James O'Loughlin is thinking about the idea of a magnification app and helping people with vision issues to see better. That is one of the long-term ideas. What does superhuman powers look like? We see accessibility features. It's a huge part of what Apple does. Is there's big sections of their settings app that are just accessibility features to make the whole system more usable by people who have various differences. And it's amazing to see all of that. But that's usually restorative features. What we have yet to see really implemented on a large scale is what is like superhuman features look like. And I'm seeing what is it, Devin, in our comments, imagining the Black Mirror blocking feature, right? That we will see. Someone can do that with this probably pretty quickly, right? Is build the static blocking Black Mirror feature right on another human body.
Yeah, person tracking and pet tracking are things that certainly I'm excited to see developers start playing with. You could imagine also doing like translation. Obviously, it's a lot more useful on glasses out in the physical world outside of your home. But even within your home, it'd be interesting to do some demos of, doing real-time speech recognition and translation, and then pinning the subtitles under a person's face, or even as like a cartoon speech bubble coming out of their head, for example, would be a very interesting use case.
I can't even. So, like, you're going to derail me, but like, I imagine real-time translation on the EyeSight external display. That's one thing I've been imagining. The use case for that is how cool would that be? Is if you say something in one language and you display it in another for a person that you're speaking to, you could probably. That's so cyberpunk. I can't even. No one has even fathomed it, right? Like it's I'm talking about it for the first time. Yeah, Google Lens. Remember that Lens app? If you ever tried that Lens app that Google bought, you saw this future back then, right? As soon as you held up your webcam, well, like I just described a flow that is available for VR headsets with Passthrough right around the corner.
Yeah, and we should now note the other platforms talking about Google and Apple. So in Apple's case, they only give camera access to enterprise. So you have to agree to say that you're an enterprise company using this for enterprise purposes. You can't ship it on the App Store. It has to be fully internal. We haven't heard anything from Apple yet about whether they plan to change that. Maybe at WWDC in June, Apple says we're going to follow Meta and Google, because that brings me on to Google, right? So not only will Google have this on day one, and it'll actually use the same Android API, so developers should be able to use almost entirely the same code that they use for this on Android XR headsets, starting with the Samsung headset that will debut Android XR. But it will also have Google Lens, right? Literally, Google Lens will be an integral feature of Android XR. Google has said this. Ian has tried it, I believe, in your demo or something similar to it, and that's a big selling point from Samsung and Google's perspective of the Samsung headset.
Yeah, there was Gemini was available inside the Android XR, and I asked it to tell me how many people were in the room by just looking around at them, and I got very different answers. So there's a long way to go there to make use of it, but I think it's going to happen very, very rapidly. I was laughing to myself, imagining a use case here, David, of what if you could wear the pass-through camera and record the cries of your pet just over time, and you get enough of a database of the different yelps or meowing of your cat, and then you basically start translating what the cat is. You could start tagging them. Oh, that meow is when he's hungry. That meow is when he's and you use this little training library that you're getting through the pass-through cameras to start to translate your pet's speech into human speech. I think we can get there.
That's certainly an interesting one, putting little speech bubbles above your cat. I wonder if we'll see any developers start to work on that. Maybe human speech bubbles first, and then we'll move on to kitty.
No, I refuse.
Okay.
All right. All
Yeah,
right,
so I think
let's
we've
move on.
covered that. We've covered what Apple are going to do there, at least from what we know. We've covered that Google's going to have the same thing. I think it's time to move on to talk about the Snap Spectacles big system software update that you covered. So this brings GPS, and it also coincides with Peridot getting real-time co-located multiplayer.
Yeah, this is a big thing. My original hands-on when Snapchat launched 6 months ago, its newest spectacles glasses. My headline from the hands-on at the time suggested that the glasses were good for these little dot creatures. They're about Pikachu-sized, dog-sized, cat-sized, and they can walk around in front of you and be framed perfectly within the limited field of view of the Snapchat spectacles glasses. When they launched it, it was sort of promising this feature that you can have your creatures come out and play together. I painted this picture in that original hands-on of one day walking down the street and spotting another digital creature, one of these dots across the street on the other wall. Like maybe they're running along the rooftops or something, and you see them up there, and they come down and walk across the street and start interacting with your pet out in the street. And you actually have a social AR interaction for the first time where you've connected with a stranger based on the behavior of your pets. Very, very strange to imagine, but I can see all of it working within this ecosystem, and you need features like GPS for it to work. So that's what's there now. It's you can start building these types of apps for Snapchat that were sort of promised 6 months ago. Now these features are really robustly available.
Yeah, GPS is definitely essential for outdoor AR glasses like these. The one thing I want to push back a little bit on is, you say that these creatures are small enough that they can be seen within the field of view, and that's certainly true. But the limited field of view of AR glasses still means that you kind of lose object permanence of them, because if you're not looking at them, you don't see them. What you do see, as you pointed out, and very cleverly on Niantic's part, is a little kind of uh, join the dots arrow system that points you over to where the pet is. But like, you talk about spotting someone else's pet. Sure, that's something that we'll eventually get with wide field of view AR glasses, but where this technology is today, unless you happen to be looking at the exact kind of position where that pet is, or the right direction, often you're going to walk straight by them without even realizing that they have a digital pet because it's just outside the field of view.
Yeah, so good question out there from F Meister asking, do Niantic still own Peridot and Ingress, but they sold the rest of the way I understand this separation to have occurred, and we've covered this elsewhere, but let's just recap it real quick, is the people that make this game are at Niantic Spatial. And so they're still developing this core game idea for Niantic Spatial, while Pokemon Go and basically everything else went over to the other company, Scopely, and is now owned by the King of Saudi Arabia. So owned by monarchy is where your Pokédex resides. So that's my understanding of the breakup, and it's really fascinating to think about this also in context of these creatures. So David, really good context there on the field of view still being an issue. We've got a stream and coverage planned coming soon with Stay Forever Home. That's the pet game coming to MetaQuest headsets. And we're going to have a great demo stream in our format that we do in the studio exclusively. I haven't seen this anywhere else yet, really done this way. But we're basically going to have Don Hopper's living room with a pet inside of it. And we should see the transition from Don being in his living room to straight VR, where you've basically taken the pet out for a walk in virtual reality. And you cannot do that in AR glasses. You're going to have to switch devices from the Snapchat spectacles to your VR headset with pass-through capabilities in order to have that same experience. And yeah, I just wanted to explain that.
Yeah, virtual pets. We're very bullish on this. There's a lot of virtual pets coming that we think are going to be a really core part of headsets and glasses. One thing I do want to note here is that while I am very harsh on the Snap Spectacles hardware, as I am with all currently shipping transparent AR optics, because they just are not good enough from a field of view perspective to be useful. And if you don't believe me, go and try it and you'll see. What I want to reiterate, as I've said before, is that Snap OS, their software solution, is incredible. So we talk about these multiplayer co-located Peridots, these little creatures. And if you try to do co-located multiplayer on Quest, it can be a real chore of launching these separate apps and waiting for the, fully VR loading screen to go away so that you can then click through 5 different menus after watching 6 different splash screens just to go to multiplayer and join friend and then setting up the co-location. To be clear, that's not required, but unfortunately, that's how a lot of developers still build their VR apps as if they're PC games. With SnapOS, everything is architected so that none of that BS is in the way. You open the main menu, you see someone nearby is using a co-located experience. You click join, and it's there. It's done. This was the best part of my Snap experience. I think they have really built an OS here that is designed for this kind of co-located experience without all of the software friction, which again, some of it is just inherent to the way that these Android-based VR operating systems are built. Some of it is the developers still haven't quite grokked that immersive content and AR content and all this needs to be super low friction. Get rid of all the loading screens, optimize heavily for the lowest time to action possible. You should be measuring it in single digit seconds. And if it gets past 10 seconds, you need to rethink how you've architected this app for this kind of experience. We talk about these board games that we just talked about with Passthrough. You cannot have this clunky joining experience. Make your app load really, really quickly. Throw out anything that makes it take too long to load. Use the Bluetooth co-location API to automatically detect a nearby headset. Launch the thing. No menus, no crawling through join and create server, or enter code. The technology is possible to develop this to just make it work. And the great thing about SnapOS is it doesn't even let developers mess it up. It kind of has this all built in on a system level. So just want to stress, if you could put SnapOS onto wide field of view magic sci-fi AR glasses, this would be a incredible product.
Well, it's wild to think. I joke about these weird situations that these companies could get in, like how if we could dump Quest OS off Horizon OS off of the system and still have it run all of the games that are available in the Quest store and replace it with the ecosystem of features that are available on Snap OS, I would take it in an instant. So it's like, I wish that this operating system ran on VR headsets as its basis, but they're starting it elsewhere.
That would be cool too, right? Even seeing Snap OS on a mixed reality headset like Quest 3 would be really, really interesting because it just shows that the software architecture that we accept today is just how things are. This kind of every app is a siloed island that has a clunky PC-like menu system that you have to go through after 5 different splash screens and loading screens. That doesn't have to be the way software is. That's not a hardware issue. That's how the entire software stack is architected issue. And there is another way, and that's what Snap OS shows. I think we've probably talked about this a bit too much, though. If there's nothing else you want to say, let's move on.
Yeah, we've agreed, as I mentioned in the comments, that we're not going to have our VR versus AR debate again. We've shelved that one for a while at least. And as our commenters are like, let's move on from Snap. Let's move on from Snap.
There's one comment I want to bring up here from Jack about our previous topic, actually, which I think is super interesting. And Jack points out that another usage of the camera pass-through API on Quest is that you can measure the room's lighting levels and even with more advanced algorithms, the direction of light, and then use that to make the lighting and shadows of virtual objects more realistic. This is something that Apple Vision Pro does automatically and provides to developers. So you do get like the light positions and the shadow positions. And it really matters, right? When you actually see, oh, wow, the shadow from these virtual objects is being cast in the same direction as the shadows from real objects in my room. At times you can really be like, wait, is that a virtual object or a real object? For a few seconds, your brain can actually get confused. And so I'm really excited to see developers do that. And I hope Meta does this, right? I'm surprised Meta doesn't already provide this for developers, even without giving pass-through camera access.
Yeah, we're ready to talk about LG next, and then we've got a whole section for Andrew Bosworth. And goodness, if we've still got Guy Godin out in the comments, and we've still got Darshan out in the comments when we talk about the Andrew Bosworth section, I would like to see what they have to say when we cover those comments before we get to the big screen stuff at the end of the section. So let's talk about LG real quick before we do that.
Yeah, sure. So a South Korean news outlet, The Bell, reported that LG has stopped its XR product development efforts. So it has ceased actively developing near-term AR, VR, MR products. And so LG confirmed to that outlet in a statement that this was the case, but did note that it is still conducting long-term research and development on XR. So according to this report, LG has decided to focus more on heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, HVAC, and robotics. And so they just made the decision to spend the money on that. The important background context here is that LG at one point was partnered with Meta to, according to multiple reports from South Korean news outlets, develop future Quest Pro headsets. So there was at one point, according to quite a few reports that makes me think that this is very much so true, going to be a 2025 Quest Pro 2. It may have been LG branded, but that's what it would realistically have been as a product this year. And so issues with this partnership, differences in opinions, LG's feeling that Apple Vision Pro didn't do well enough for it to want to really heavily compete on it, meant that this partnership has essentially dissolved by now, and that's not going to happen. At one point, it was reported that they kind of, in a last-ditch effort, maybe pushed it out to 2027, but now it is quite clear that this is gone. LG is no longer working with Meta or anyone. It's not that they've gone to work with Google and Android XR or anything like that. They've just quit their whole kind of venture. And we should point out that LG did have a very short history in this industry. In 2016, it released this ultra compact phone tethered headset that was for viewing 360-degree videos that were captured by those really awful low resolution 360 hand mounted cameras that you had around a decade ago. And it had just awful reviews. It was like very compact. Okay. So it's like big screen beyond size, you could even say, but like it wasn't anything like a big screen beyond. It was like really, really low field of view and resolution, and just by all regards awful. Then in 2017, they showed off a Steam VR headset, a PC VR headset that was basically taking the idea of the HTC Vive and adding higher resolution displays and kind of more sleek design, as well as like interesting controllers. But it was essentially like a Vive Pro, but a year before the Vive Pro, right? And I think Ian might have been there to try it out in 2017, and they never shipped it. Nothing ever came of it.
I have a very fond memory of like looking inside that device once and enjoying like an improved resolution and improved color accuracy, or at least color range. And I was just like, oh, we reported on that, and it just never materialized. And goodness, I don't know. I appreciated the commenter out there from saying, what was it, that the VR roller coaster of emotions the VR train is. And then I appreciated Kid Blaze's question: is VR more GPU or CPU heavy? And Onakazu replying, yes. And I love that response, Onakazi. And then, but seriously, it's usually a GPU bottleneck. I can't wait to really get into the holodeck story with you guys. That's going to be a really fun one when we talk about the 4090s. They've got driving this holodeck in Austin, Texas, and then they have that going through a Quest Pro at the end of this line. So like they've got AirLink in the middle between a whole line of 4090s, beaming to these last generation Quest Pro headsets. And we're talking about the flow of that media into your eyeballs being the absolute, there's bottlenecks at every single spot in that chain, yet it works amazingly well.
I think everyone's looking forward to that article. Hopefully it does get out pretty soon.
Yeah, I think it should be the next day or so, but we'll see. Make sure to see, and we'll talk about that whole experience of GDC because I ended up talking to the guy who's behind that project while at GDC. This is the headset, yeah.
Yeah, this is LG's Steam VR headset, showed off at GDC 2017. Crazy, like 8 years ago, and it never shipped. Yeah, so it would have basically just been like a Vive Pro 2, but before Vive Pro, it would have been, you had the HTC Vive, you would have then had the LG headset high up, but they just didn't go for it, right? This was a long time ago, and I doubt that anyone that's worked on this project is still involved in VR at LG by now. It's one of those things where it's relegated to history and our image archives, I guess. Still see this.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It's the history of, we're gonna need like rest in peace, like metadata here for, like all the facts about them, so you can we can remember that I grabbed this headset off the shelf and put it on my head and imagined the different history that we could have had should this thing have actually shipped, should PC or VR have had the support of more than one generation of virtual link cable to really push it inside PC VR, but whatever.
So James O'Loughlin asks, does LG supply great displays for VR hardware like micro OLED or anything else? So they do provide some LCD displays that go into some of the VR headsets, the LG display, but nothing remarkable that's breathtaking. However, as we did report on beforehand, they are working on a next generation 4K micro OLED display that has the brightness to drive the low persistence that would solve the motion blur that you see in Apple Vision Pro. So there may be a few years down the line a future version of Vision Pro that uses these, or some other headset, and they're basically trying to push beyond the limitations of the current Sony and BOE micro OLEDs and deliver something really, really great. And it also has the widest color gamut of any of the 4K micro OLEDs that we've seen shown off yet. So LG, I guess you could say, they are making moves in the background, but the news here is that they've cancelled their near-term product efforts. They do not think that the market is ready for the kind of product they want to make. They reportedly they wanted to build a high-end one. They didn't want to do low-end. They wanted to build something that was a true Vision Pro competitor, but running Meta's Horizon OS. And Vision Pro, from their perspective, was not the kind of success that would lead them to want to continue to do that. And we can argue another day about whether they're right about that, but that's what decision they've made.
Yeah, seeing people talk about some of the depictions of VR that they're seeing in media. We had a story about the Black Mirror depiction that is out there that looks somewhere between the Android headsets out there and the Quest headset with eyesight cameras. And then I'm seeing another one mentioned here that just looks laughably big. We're getting to, we're going to the end of this show when we're going to talk about truly slim VR.
Yeah. This is the Black Mirror Season 7 headset that was shown for 1 or 2 seconds in the trailer.
Turn it off.
Like a 3D printed thing you can see here that is meant to kind of be, it's clearly trying to mock Apple Vision Pro's eyesight reverse pass-through system, but it kind of looks like it's a Quest Pro at the same time. This is almost certainly just a mock model with this superimposed in post-production.
But I appreciate that mechanically what he does is he raises his hand and he taps the side of the headset.
2-finger tap. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a 2-finger tap.
Yeah.
Beautiful. So it's just slightly a little sci-fi because, you can smack the side of your head on a Quest to do the same thing. So here's Black Mirror mocking both Apple and Meta at once in a horrible roast of the VR market. This is going to hurt when we watch it, whatever it is. We prepare yourself, prepare your body. You joke about the UploadVR drinking game. Whenever this episode is going to be, you're going to need to be mentally prepared for. Okay.
Yeah. So I think what the commenter brought up is very valid here, right? Because we've seen how sci-fi in traditional media in movies actually underestimates VR. So you see from just a few years ago, sci-fi movies and TV shows that are supposed to be set in 2040 or 2050, and they have these big, bulky headsets that even today in our current VR market look ridiculous. And we'll talk at the end, obviously, about Bigscreen Beyond 2, which makes all of this seem completely absurd. But as you say, these shows have these headsets that come out to here or out to here, and they're supposed to be these advanced VR. And now even today, you pick up a Quest 3 or a Pico 4 Ultra or an Apple Vision Pro, and it looks way beyond what these movies are supposed to show. And I think my argument in the article about this Black Mirror headset is that I think the same thing is going to happen with this. I think this is a mockery of Generation 1 reverse pass-through, Apple's EyeSight version 1. And I think that down the line, maybe 3-5 years, whatever it is, we're going to get really, really good reverse pass-through that looks more like this concept render. And there are multiple companies, I can tell you right now, that are working on this. There are companies that are trying to sell reverse pass-through as their technology product to big headset makers. And I've seen in the background, I've seen some prototypes that look a lot more like this than Apple Vision Pros. This is a solvable engineering problem. And so it's possible that, some person sits down to watch Black Mirror season 7 5 years from now and goes, I don't get it. That's not what these headsets look like.
Yep, love it. Fantastic. And our audience is catching up. I feel bad for them because they're going through those eyeballs that we just watched and catching up. Arlen has been catching up this whole episode and keeps getting knocked down by reality back into the past. So we hope you catch up to us, Arlen, and anyone else doing the time travel thing out there. Are we ready to talk about the Andrew Bosworth section? I heard someone in our comments that they needed to send the link to Andrew Bosworth so that he had a chance to defend himself, was the way they worded it, against the commenters out there. So we hope that someone in Metacoms, has put that link. I've joked in the past that it's very, like, imagine the Nolan Sorrento scene where they're doing the call on Planet Doom for all the millions of people who live inside the Oasis, and Sorrento he turns off the stream, like laughs at it, but he realizes someone else is playing it in his general vicinity. That's what I think you guys can do out there with our audience to bring Andrew Bosworth into this conversation with us. So yeah.
I want to be clear that our two articles on these two things that Bosworth has said that we're talking about are just matter-of-fact articles. These are just stating what did he say from a journalistic perspective. So we're going to talk about two things. Firstly, he's responded to the controversy around Meta using MR to mean both MR and VR. And then we'll talk about him claiming that he loved and hoped to keep the Oculus brand. So let's start with the VR to MR thing, right? If you've missed this, in recent months, where Meta used to say MR/VR or VR/MR to mean, their Quest headsets, Horizon, all that stuff, they now just use MR. So you have this weird situation wherein, for example, they have a blog post saying, get great savings on these MR games, where 10 out of 11 of the games are fully immersive VR. You get some quirks like when you sign up to MetaConnect 2025, there's no option for VR developer anymore. You can be a mixed reality developer, but there's no option for a virtual reality developer. There are other little quirks like this, to the point where the phrase VR is almost not used at all on the MetaQuest website anymore. When you go to buy a Quest, you're reading the details. You might not even know that this thing does VR, because you're told all about how get the best of mixed reality, the mixed reality you need. This is mixed reality. Welcome to mixed reality. And you get some little mentions of fully immersive content, but you may not fully make the connection that is VR. So that was the controversy. Let's see what Andrew Bosworth had to say about this. The one thing I'm going to say before I read this out is that it doesn't sound as aggressive as it might come across when you go and watch his video. It really, when it's put into text, it sounds really, really bad. But go and watch the video of him actually saying this, which we've embedded on UploadVR.com to get his real tone. So he called this outrage one of the most absolutely manufactured controversies of all time, and just a total fabrication of the community out of nothingness, saying, we use the term mixed reality more often in public and internally because there was some confusion in the marketplace. Since Apple leaned so hard into marketing mixed reality features for the Vision Pro, we wanted to make sure that people were aware the Quest 3 in particular was as good as, or in my opinion, better than what they get elsewhere. We found out through market research, which we do, that this was a key thing. So often this community is so crazy. Listen, if you're watching this, you're in. I don't need to talk to you. I'm trying to get more people in. You know that, right? most people we're marketing to, they're not you. They're not following my ANAs. They're the people who have currently chosen not to buy in, and we'd like them to. And I figure out how to help them do that. And he concluded by saying, God, y'all need to move on.
I want to look at the comments for any commentary from there. Andrew Bosworth, if you're there, now is the time to speak up. Yeah, he can. They don't have. Does Meta have the capability to stand in the room right now with us, David, like a silent ghost? Because I think Resonite has that capability somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, theoretically, they could add themselves to the release channel and show up, but we would see them as an avatar over there in the corner. We would see Andrew Bosworth emerge in the seat in the corner. We do have a spectator seat over there behind the camera.
So, Andrew, if you have the capability to add yourself to our release channel, I would like to see you use that power to understand what it means, right? Okay, so I appreciate that, David. Arlen just caught up to the future. What a beautiful time to catch up to the present. That was oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, what's the next CTO comment story?
Well, let's just quickly say to this, look, what he's saying here is, again, it sounds less aggressive in his voice. Try it out. My Northern Irish accents makes everything sound a little bit too aggressive, but he's just saying that if you're already in the industry, the purpose of their external communications is primarily to bring more people in. And we've talked about this for a long time. Meta's primary goal, whether you love it or you hate it, is not to enrich the experience of people who are already in. That's one of their goals, sure. But their primary goal is to grow the VR, MR, whatever you want to call it, market, bring more people in, and then from that, developers have more people to sell content to, users have more people to play social and multiplayer games with, there are more developers that emerge out of becoming users. All of this gives this giant rising tides experience, and obviously for Meta, they have more customers, more users, and they can monetize that at a greater scale. So that's his argument here. He's saying, look, folks, our market research says that normies accept mixed reality better than VR, that this is something that it makes people buy more headsets. And if you want more people in the industry, this is what you need to do. So, I'm not saying I agree with Bosworth. I'm just pointing out in a charitable sense, this is what his argument is.
Yeah. Well, there's the quote I've got from the holodeck guy, Jonathan Kuhn is his name. He runs the holodeck, Four Seasons private residences coming together outside Austin. And he offered me the most incredible quote, and I don't want to butcher it and use it right now before I want to get it exactly right the way he said it to me. But it is pushing back at some of the strategies here. And I think we will talk about the strategies that could have been when we talk about the Big Screen Beyond 2 near the end of the show. So I appreciate your I can't even call it a dramatic reading of Andrew Bosworth's quote, because you did attempt not to make it dramatic.
I think, there's some fighting words there. I mean, the least charitable thing I'd say about this is it's like, on the one hand, you would never get an Apple executive doing an Ask Me Anything session where they're just taking random questions and, sitting in their car or the corner of their room on their phone and just kind of riffing off whatever their answer is. That's, on the one hand, you do have to acknowledge that Bosworth's willingness to do these, bi-monthly or monthly sometimes Ask Me Anything sessions and just speak to the community directly is commendable. And the way that he speaks to people directly on X and other social media platforms, that should be commended. But there's a trade-off in that. Sometimes you're going to get the raw thoughts, and sometimes it's going to be, this community is so crazy to horribly kind of selectively quote part of that, and God move on is what you're going to get sometimes. So
Biggs, the sentiment is correct, but again, it shows how tone deaf the company is to me. They are not actively playing their own top titles, in my opinion, because they have something in Quest or on Quest that they don't actually want. Fascinating dynamic to think about there, right? Like, they're building a device that is popular with children in free-to-play worlds right now, and that's we'll
get to that. We've got that soon. That's a topic coming up. Let's talk to the next one. As LL said, they're more interested in the Oculus thing. As Clayman says, this is UploadVR now, so welcome to the MR download. The next topic on the MR download will be Andrew Bosworth says, Oculus was a name I definitely loved and hoped to keep. I hope that this story gets told someday, but suffice to say, it isn't what everyone thinks, and it isn't something I'm free to talk about just yet. He also said, I'll definitely tell the story someday. There are some statutes that I need to wait out, though. So this one is fascinating to me because, you know, when Oculus Quest was rebranded to MetaQuest, when all of the software and platform went from Oculus to MetaQuest, this was something that was pitched by Bosworth as a decision. This happened exactly alongside Facebook changing its name to Meta, and Bosworth's argument at the time in a public comment was that this was so that people understood that the Quest was a product from Meta. There was never any mention of possible background issues. He didn't say, for various reasons we can't talk about. It was, this is why it is. So now, what is it, 4 years later, Bosworth is coming out and saying, actually, there were a whole bunch of secret reasons behind this, and I can't talk about it, but I'm going to talk about it soon. So I'm very, very interested to see what this is. For whatever this reason is, you could then assume by definition that had this not occurred, if Bosworth is being honest here, it would still be called Oculus today.
Yeah, it's fascinating to think about what could have been with this naming and what could have come because of it. I'm going to bring this up again when we talk about Bigscreen Beyond, because there was there a universe where we got to an Oculus Rift 6 instead of instead of this other thing, right?
Well, I mean, this, to be clear, this is just about the brand. This isn't about the Rift. This is about Oculus Quest versus Meta Quest.
Sure.
You can totally entertain a parallel universe where things went differently like that, and that's something we can definitely talk about. But I think just on this, to be clear, what Bosworth is saying, he's just talking about the actual brand name Oculus.
So I want to tell a little story here. I've shared it before, but I got to share this little anecdote. I once talked to the person who owned Oculu.com. So just cover up the S there. And he owned Oculu.com and ended up suing Oculus, if I recall, or Meta, and over the name difference. And the argument at the time was they came out of nowhere with Oculus and started taking all of their search results. And I remember being in the interview with the guy who owned this URL that was competing now with search results, and relaying to him the number of units that were being sold of either it was the DK1 or the DK2 at the time. It was probably the DK1. And he was like, I didn't realize they were doing that kind of volume. That was 2013, 14 or something like that. And that poor, you can still go give him some traffic right now. Go check out. I think he's out there.
Yeah. So some commenters are saying, I guess it's somewhat believable that Bosworth may be telling the truth here, because as the commenters are pointing out, this was a really strong brand with like Kleenex level recognition. To this day, as some commenters are pointing out, many normies still call all VR headsets an Oculus. This is the kind of brand that companies pay 100 billion for, right? This is the kind of brand that is like, if you're literally are having your brand be associated with the entire category of product, that's something, why would you ever throw that away? So you may say it was vanity and they just wanted to, have Meta in the name. Some of the speculation here in the comments, we'll go into speculation, I guess, is that they were trying to distance themselves from Palmer Luckey for potentially issues related to US politics. Reasons that now in this day and age, with Mark Zuckerberg's stance in the current way that US politics has gone, may be a lot less valid, and perhaps Mark Zuckerberg and Andrew Bosworth, depending on what the reasons were, may have wished they did keep the Oculus name now. And from what we saw last year when Andrew Bosworth apologized to Palmer Luckey and Mark Zuckerberg praised Palmer Luckey, it may be that they wish that not only did they not get away the Oculus name, but that they kept the Oculus founder, Palmer Luckey himself. So you could go into all kinds of rabbit holes here and alternative histories, but I am fascinated to see what exactly is this reason Bosworth is alluding to.
Yeah, so we're going to need, this is the Charlie wall for us in the future, I suppose. where we will be connecting the red dots from here to here and from here to here. Yeah, that's a good image for that. Yeah, I'm ready to move on. I want to talk about the Meta GDC revelations that seemed like they were a little bit of a response. Um, the 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 other thing I'm remembering, it wasn't just Oculus, right? I think they owned OculusVR.com. I think that was the original URL, right?
Yeah, I mean, the company was Oculus VR. That was,
Yeah.
the full name trading as Oculus, but it was Oculus VR, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so the other thing, right? Everyone called it the Oculus, right? And they didn't really pay attention to the VR. Now it's mixed, but whatever. All right, let's okay. Please, Andrew, come on, talk to us about. No, you're not right. No, he told us to let it go. Sorry.
Yeah, he said move on or let it go or whatever
All
it
right.
was. Yeah, yeah. So I guess Bosworth has declared it. I guess we have to move on. No,
Oh
to be
wait,
clear,
we've got the big screen beyond coming up. Yes.
yeah. So just for all the folks wondering, where are we in this show? Where are we going to next? We're now going to talk about two things that Meta said this week at GDC, the Games Developer Conference, this big conference that we've had. Our Henry Stockdale, our Don Hopper, and Ian Hamilton at this week. And then once we talk about those two topics of GDC, we're going to the final big discussion of the show, Bigscreen Beyond 2. So stick with us. So I guess it really is three things they said here, and I'll point them all out first, and then we can kind of go into topics. So, firstly, Meta's Chris Pruitt gave this talk. He's their director of games, and he basically said, and I recommend going to the article on UploadVR.com to get more details about this. He said that according to Meta's data, the open store and worlds push did not meaningfully affect spending. That's the first thing. The second thing is that last year, headset usage, Quest headset usage per month per user increased by 30%. So retention and usage is up. Spending hasn't gone down. The third thing that Meta has said is that they are still investing massively in VR gaming and don't plan to stop. So they didn't say MR, they said VR gaming. And this isn't, we're investing in the ecosystem, we're investing in the metaverse. This is, and I quote, we are still investing massively in VR gaming and don't plan to stop. And that comes alongside Meta revealing that 100 games, VR and MR, that shipped last year were funded by Meta, and that there are 200 games currently in development that were funded by Meta. So a lot of things they're saying to developers here. Firstly, they're saying we're not responsible for this drop. This is a wider market trend. Headset usage is up. We're still investing massively in VR. Let's start with that first one. So Chris Pruitt said that when Meta made each of the changes that have been ascribed by the industry as being the cause of some developers seeing revenues drop, they A/B tested it. So they show it to some users and not others. So for the open store, according to Meta, they showed some users the same curated store. So even though it was merged in, they were still only seeing the titles that were available before the App Lab merge, not the App Lab and new titles. And then they showed other users the new open store with all the App Lab titles, all of the Gorilla Tag clones. And according to Chris Pruitt from Meta, that testing showed a difference of 1% in spending. So it did decrease, but by 1% per user. So he's saying that did not meaningfully affect things, that 1% is not in any way meaningful. As well, the Horizon Worlds push, where they show a bunch of Horizon Worlds instead of apps on your mobile app. You open the phone app and you don't see VR games, you see Horizon Worlds. They say that they A/B tested that and find that it reduced spending by 3% per user. And then the final statistic on spending is that overall, not per user, but overall revenue increased last year by 12%. So the total spending on the Quest platform went up by 12%. The open store caused a 1% reduction per user, and the Horizon Worlds push caused a 3% reduction per user. So essentially what Pruitt's saying is those are not responsible. What he's saying is responsible is that for Quest 3S, Meta found something it didn't expect. a bigger shift in demographics from buyers than it had ever seen. So with Quest 3S, they're seeing younger buyers, teenagers, young adults now are the majority of not only buyers, but also users. And that these people like to play the same kind of games they play across the wider games industry, whether it be Fortnite or Roblox or Minecraft or whatever, typically free to play or low cost games that have a lot of social interaction, as well as meme games like I Am Cat, the kind of things that teenagers love. And that these people spend less money on your traditional hardcore VR games, and that is a big market shift. They also say, Meta says, that they are seeing a new kind of adult buyer that buys Quest 3S that isn't looking for games at all. They see their Quest 3S as a giant TV, and they spend their time in YouTube, in Netflix, in Prime Video, and doing a bit of spatial computing. And that kind of user, they have very different requirements. They say you can get them to get store apps when it's to do with like a concert or sports or other things like that, but these aren't people that play games typically. These are, the kind of adults that their main usage for technology is social communication and watching sports and concerts. So these market shifts, according to Meta, which they claim are happening across the entire technology and gaming industry, are the majority responsible for the shift that we're seeing. And again, I want to keep stressing here, I am saying the word according to Meta because don't shoot the messenger. I'm just bringing you what Chris Pruitt of Meta, the director of games, has told developers this week at GDC.
Yeah, fascinating context there. And for anyone that isn't aware, Chris Pruitt knows what he's doing when he announces this information each year. The development community holds its breath waiting for him to present this data. It is probably the most well-attended, or one of the most well-attended events at GDC, anchors the whole event for many devs who are going there to hear straight from Chris Pruitt's mouth what is the state of the market, what is working, how is it working. We sat waiting for this and got it out as soon as we possibly could to our audience. But it's just for future reference. If you're going to a GDC in the future, this is an annual event that we now look forward to. We often have complained, and I'm gonna throw this back at all this usage stuff. Right? There's very much a wonder about the question of cause and effect. Are we at free to play being a leading thing on the MetaQuest platform because people are telling Meta that's what they want? Or is there some kind of back and forth, like this is what Meta really wanted all along, so that's what they made a space for over time. But point is, we will keep getting these updated figures here annually, hopefully. But like my point is, Meta has never given us really good, solid sales figures, and they've never given us really good, solid usage figures for how many people are in headsets. They give us this vague one annual summary, and this is the best we ever really get from them.
Yeah, on that free-to-play thing, I do think we do just have to continue to stress that Meta is kind of right to say that this is something that's happening across the whole games industry, whether it be Roblox or Fortnite. The traditional AAA $60, $70 title is losing ground, except for the very biggest of blockbusters with a lot of fan loyalty, and more kind of indie darlings and free-to-play platforms are taking over for people's time and attention. Disposable income is dropping for some demographics. The way that people spend their money is changing, and it's very difficult to pinpoint, what amount of this is just consumer spending changing, and how much of this is something that Meta has done. If it's the former, there's nothing Meta can really do about that, right? Like, Meta can promote things to people, Meta can build a store in a certain way, but I don't know if this is a phrase you have over there, but you can bring a horse to water, but you can't make it drink, right? Consumers are going to do what they want to do. They're going to spend money on how they want to spend it. And at the end of the day, the cause and effect here is that companies respond to consumer desires, and they can create it through marketing and advertising, sure, and they can influence it, but only to a degree. You can't completely manufacture it, right? You can't make everyone want to buy something that they don't want to buy, or spend their time doing something that they really don't want to do in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, it's funny. I don't know if this is the place for it, but like there's I keep coming back to this holodeck story that I'm going to get out in front of everyone, but one of the things that the 4090s graphics cards were providing in that holodeck experience, flowing those graphics cards in another room to Quest Pros in the next room. One of the things in one of those rooms are doubled reflections in each of the mirrors. Um, so you go into a virtual bathroom, you look over here at the mirror, and you see a reflection of your headset double as it's coming back and forth, and that's how they're drawing with the ray tracing. And the thing is, I'm 40 years old now, and that catches my eye as a 40-year-old. Like I've been around this world for a couple decades now, and whoa, it's reflections like that that catch my eye. It's lighting that I wouldn't notice otherwise. Like, how many times do you get in a room with doubled mirrors like that, reflecting light at you back and forth? You need to have that effect be one-to-one, see your reflection going back and forth like that. Like, kids don't necessarily notice those things that you get out of an RTX 4090. And I think that's something that has to be said here, right? Like, those graphics cards everyone out there is paying for, like, that's the VR everyone dreams about for 20 years, wanting to one day afford. And what they're getting is a gray muddled mess on a little itty bitty console instead.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult to develop good graphics standalone in VR, but I don't think that, like, I wouldn't call Batman Arkham Shadow or Assassin's Creed Nexus's graphics bad, right? And they're not like cartoon or gray in that sense, but you don't get all developers to be able to do that for sure. It's surely a lot more difficult, but I don't think children care, right? They, teenagers and kids that are playing Roblox on their PC, that's not their biggest priority. And I think one of the things that the Nintendo Switch showed the industry, which I think a lot of people really just haven't accepted, is that graphics are important, but they are not the most important thing in gaming. And a lot of people in the core gaming audience said, oh, the Switch is so underpowered compared to the PS4 and the Xbox 360 clearly, or sorry, Xbox One, clearly it's gonna, flop. And not only did it not flop, but it's still selling really well all the way into the PS5 and Xbox Series S and X era, and is actually the highest selling console in the world. So yes, in VR it matters more when you can see it magnified in front of you, but it's not the be all and end all, even for adults. If other factors do matter. Really interesting statistic here from James O'Loughlin, who's saying that 60% of games people play across platforms are 6 or more years old. It does show you how this is kind of the trend towards gaming. 20 years ago, you didn't spend all your time in one game. You bought all of these different games that you would kind of play for a little while. And now these companies all want to build that one game that you spend your entire life in. Not a game, but a platform. And that's the struggle that some developers are feeling. But as another commenter pointed out, there are VR developers like Walkabout Mini Golf, Take a Shot, Golf Plus, and others who are finding that they can have a dedicated audience of people who they can sell DLC and they can sell subscriptions to. And you could argue Meta does that with Beat Games and Beat Saber 2, right? You have this current recurring revenue from people buying Beat Saber DLC packs that has propelled it beyond 300 million in revenue.
So I'm curious if Golf Plus is a member of the Scaled Partnerships program at Meta. I talked to you about this briefly, but I would be curious if you go to Meta's jobs site and enter F2P or free to play or Scaled Partnerships, how many jobs pop up in that sort of department of Meta right now? What are they actually hiring for at Meta is always a question we return to. We've done it over various times. Like, it's not something we do frequently, but you can see the shifts in their hiring patterns and the overall direction by going to the Meta careers page and seeing what they're hiring for. And I point this out just because, like, there's lots of great places like Gorilla Tag and other Axiom and Golf Plus. These are tentpole destinations to go to in VR, but we don't recognize them as being owned by Meta, even though they have very close ties to the Meta ecosystem that like, man, what would the Meta ecosystem be without Golf Plus? It would be greatly diminished.
Yeah, I mean, as you say there, it's symbiotic, right? So Meta helps them. And Golf Plus, I think they did an experiment once where they bundled it with Quest. I think, it's maybe been on Quest Plus one of the months as well. But of course, then it brings entirely new people in. And, to be clear, that's not a free-to-play game. That's a paid game. People are paying $30, just like people buy Walkabout Mini Golf Up Plus, and then they buy DLCs on top of that. So it shows that for when you're not targeting, young adults and teenagers, this new, really rapidly growing Quest 3 buying demographic, you need to find something that is very specific to enthusiasts that they're willing to pay for. And, one of the things we have to constantly point out here is that in every single market of content, there's going to be winners or losers, whether it be ebooks, movies, TV shows, Steam. There is going to be a power law distribution where the biggest games get the most revenue and the smallest get almost nothing. And that's just how these markets naturally work. For some developers, that's going to be very, very disappointing. But we would never say, the making a VR game is a get rich quick scheme. It's not. It is. The majority of VR developers are going to feel just like the majority of game developers on Steam feel, right? The majority feel they don't make enough money to cover their costs. That's the reality, just like the majority of startups feel, right? Or it might be like 50% or something.
All right. Well, I think we're getting ready to talk about the big screen beyond section here, aren't we? No, we got more to cover.
Yeah, so that was one of the three things we were going to there. So
two more. All right. Well, I'm going to say we're almost there.
Yeah.
And the way I want to structure this when we get to that section, David, I would love to just give the context of the travel journey
Sure.
before you give the breakdown when we get to it.
Yeah. Let's just let's get through this though. So the other thing is, so we covered this, but we want to kind of briefly say headset usage is up 30%. So this came alongside Meta saying, so this is comparing 2023 and 2024, monthly usage of headsets, Quest headsets, is up 30%. And Meta said, Chris Pruitt said, that more people now own and actively use a headset today than ever before. So there are some kind of doomers or naysayers, whatever you want to call them, who had been sort of selling this narrative that VR peaked in the pandemic and it's been, going down since. And we've been saying on this show, no, that's actually not true. Every year VR is getting bigger than it was the year before. This is a growing market. And now we have, Meta coming out and specifically saying, not only are they saying that more headsets are being owned, but actively used. More people are actively using VR today in 2025 than ever before. And that should tell you a lot about the trajectory of the industry and the prospects for the future. So I just wanted to make sure we got that quote in there.
Sure. I want to read off Biggs's comment because I think he nails something here. I think this accelerates essentially vibe coding becomes a core focus, and Quest as a gaming device recedes to become a dev kit for free-to-play MR. I really think that's an incisive, forward-looking comment from Biggs. What is the device that Mark Zuckerberg wants to put on his face and code a cool program inside for about 8 hours of time? It is not a Quest headset, and we all know that.
I think all of these narratives are too singular. People always want to say, this is what Quest is. It's this thing. It's as you say, dev kit for free-to-play MR, or it's a fitness machine, or it's a social thing. The reality is that just like a smartphone, just like a tablet, just like a PC, just like any of these kind of devices, it's for a bunch of shit, right? There's 5 different things that it's going to be for. There's for the majority of people, right? For some people, it's their way to work out. For other people, it's the way they hang out on VR chat or Rec Room. For other people, it's how they play games, whether it be, Population 1 or Pavlov or Onward or Contractors. For other people, it's their sim racing rig, right? They connect it to their PC and play their Assetto Corsa Evo or whatever they happen to play. For other people, it's their flight sim setup. They play DCS. There is this real propensity for people to box a really complicated entire market of category of use cases and it's this one thing, and that's the only thing that Meta is going to focus on. And I think one of the things Pruitt did say in his talk is there are cohorts, right? There are different types of people. You have the VR elite who are spending their $20 to $30 on the narrative single player games. You have the new wave of adults who are playing Netflix and YouTube and Prime Video on an enormous cinema screen. wherever they want. You have the new kids that are in playing Gorilla Tag and Orion Drift and I Am Cat. And if you grow this market over time, each of these groups gets bigger, and there are new groups that come in over time. So there are people who start to use it for productivity. Like it's a very small group today, but once you get 4K per eye resolution, once you get a open periphery, slimmer form factor, that group starts to get bigger. I really want to push back against this. There was, one of my favorite YouTubers is Thrill Seeker, a VR YouTuber who puts out a lot of great content, and he had this video from years ago talking about the 7 types of VR owners, and I thought that was great because he was one of the first people to really break that out and recognize this pattern, that it isn't one homogeneous block. There are cohorts.
And I think the cohorts are going to change. And again, I'm going to come back to the holodeck story until I write it up, David. They gave me the most fascinating number. I'm going to mess it up right now, trying to remember the number offhand. But they've given something like hundreds of tours to thousands of people. And a lot of the people going through those tours are every one of them is wearing a Quest Pro. And they're going into VR for 30 minutes, walking around a 5,000 square foot facility for 30 minutes. And they're largely people who are in their 50s to 80s and even into their 90s going through this holodeck experience. And according to that numbers I just gave you, hundreds of tours, thousands of people doing a 30-minute tour, not one person is pulling the headset off early before they finish the tour. They have a 100% completion rate on this 30-minute tour. And we're telling the same story that Thrill Seeker told in that video a couple years ago, right? There's different sorts of people using this for different sorts of reasons. And if you're being myopic about like, oh, one of these cohorts is adopting us this gen more than this other cohort adopting us last gen, you're missing the bigger picture here.
Yeah, exactly. Very well put. So our last topic before we get on to Bigscreen Beyond 2 from GDC, our last topic here is talking about Meta's claim that it is still investing in VR gaming. So this kind of brings us on to the 2 last places that the Oculus brand is still used. Did you know that? Did you know that there are still 2 places where Meta uses the Oculus brand? Those 2 places are Oculus Studios and Oculus Publishing. So Meta CTO Andrew Bosworth has declared, we are still investing massively in VR gaming and don't plan to stop. That would consist of both of these things. Oculus Studios is the studios that Meta owns, those 7 acquired studios that include, let me just bring up the figure here, Beat Games from Beat Saber, Camouflage, which made Iron Man VR and Batman Arkham Shadow, Sanzaru Games, which made Asgard's Wrath 2, Downpour Interactive, which is releasing the giant Onward overhaul next week, Big Box VR, which has been improving Population 1, which I still personally think is the best VR Battle Royale, Armature, who did the Resident Evil 4 port, and we don't know what they're working on right now, Twisted Pixel, who did Wilson's Heart, and again, we don't no idea what they're working on now, and Ready at Dawn was the 8th before Meta shut them down last year. So there is this narrative sometimes that's like, oh, Meta doesn't care about VR games anymore, and we've kind of just talked about that, and all Meta cares about now is mixed reality or Horizon Worlds, but you still see over the past 2 years, Meta has been, as far as I know, the only platform holder in VR that has published any AAA game, never mind 2, right? Asgard's Wrath 2 and Batman Arkham Shadow, as well as obviously, those Beat Saber music packs, Population 1, Onward, Overhaul. But that's just Oculus Studios. Then you have Oculus Publishing, and that's what Chris Pruitt was focusing on here because that's one of his main responsibilities at Meta. And he is saying that last year, 100 VR games shipped that were funded by Oculus Publishing, and that 200 are currently in development. So let me actually correct myself there. Not VR games, VR and MR titles. So they could be mixed reality or VR. Now, you don't know what exactly these are, right? They could be stuff that maybe we don't consider to be the type of games that our audience right now is wanting. Maybe that's true. But at least you can see that it's very clear that the idea that they no longer fund titles is clearly not true if there are 200 currently in development.
All right. This has been a wonderfully complex discussion with our audience about everything in the VR market. Thank you to all of our audience. Now we are ready to talk about Bigscreen Beyond 2, I think. Very big one to have drop on us in the middle of GDC week. I had a completely different plan for my team of how we were going to cover GDC week this week. And Darshan out there, the creator of Bigscreen, upended it and threw all of our company into a tizzy as we moved our schedule around to make sure that we could have the best coverage we possibly could of this device for his embargo that he set. So I was watching right before we came into the studio. He premiered this product over on his channel, on Bigscreen's channel, with almost 2,000 viewers live watching it. I saw everyone put the W in the live chat at the conclusion of that stream. It seemed like he found his audience for this product with that announcement. So congratulations to Darshan for announcing Bigscreen Beyond 2. David, I don't know if we're going to have time to show or any ability to show the videos that I put in our articles during, like, on the TV here, but it's cool to have it in the background, to have this as context. I want to talk about my physical travel here, just as a backdrop to virtual reality. I don't want to travel unless it's for a demo, a hardware demo that I cannot get somewhere else. There could be an exception for a software demo, but frankly, if you're doing a software demo this day and age, we've got the hardware at home to try the software out on. So unless you're demonstrating new hardware paired with software, there's not a huge reason to travel. Just add us to the stupid beta program for your software and don't make us go into an airplane in a tube and fly through the sky uncomfortably for 10 hours if we don't have to. That said, we love meeting devs face to face. We love getting all that direct interaction. There's lots of things people will only say to you face to face that they don't get the chance to say to over text or in other places. So it's always great to travel, but like the reason to travel for a hardware for UploadVR for this staff has to be like for one of those reasons. We got to go meet people. We got to try out hardware. But if you're going to try out software, why not just give us access to it at home most of the time? Well, Darshan basically said, I will be in San Francisco with the Bigscreen Beyond 2. And I had Henry Stockdale out there and Don Hopper going to GDC 2025 this year to meet all those devs, try out all their software. They had packed schedules with amazing devs on those schedules to meet with and try out all those things. They went and had that schedule fully packed, and then we had to go and figure this into the schedule. So I said, could I spend a little while with you, a couple hours, if I flew out to San Francisco to try it? And he said, yep. And I immediately booked a flight. And the point of all of this is the flight, the cost to UploadVR that Kyle approved was essentially one Bigscreen Beyond worth of price to fly me to San Francisco and back on a flight with that little notice in coach, with my legs cramped and my VR headsets in my bag. I went to go and try this out, and I have the video of me going in contact with this headset. They put it right into the article. My very first time wearing Bigscreen Beyond 2, my very first time trying the new IPD adjustment. Phenomenal move forward in VR hardware design here from the team at Bigscreen, and a powerful statement about the importance of VR as a fundamental layer of this technology underneath mixed reality and pass-through. So I got to meet Don Hopper out there physically in the first world on this physically for the first time in the real world on this trip. I also got to meet Henry Stockdale live in an interview. Basically, he was in an interview with one of our sources. I walked in, said, "Great to meet you." We sat down and we continued the interview, talking to a great VR developer out there doing some groundbreaking work, which we will have for you next week when we cover our Gamescast and have all of our articles out. So I just need to say this part of the reason I did this travel was I really didn't want our two people on the ground to have to tear up their schedules in order to report on this. And so I flew in, tried it out, flew back in the same day, and have that article for you here on Thursday with the announcement of this new hardware. One little note on the flight back, I spotted a guy with an Apple Vision Pro at the airport. We fist bumped. He's in the music industry, lives in New York, I guess, and called it his baby. And he had the nice big white case for it. I showed him my Belkin case for my Apple Vision Pro, and we went our separate ways. But yeah, I spotted an Apple Vision Pro on that
That's
flight
cool.
on the way back.
That's cool. Is that the first time you spotted someone else in public using the Vision Pro?
He wasn't wearing it, but he had the.
Well, yeah,
he had
having
the,
it, I guess.
Yeah, but yeah, it was the first time I've seen it, and it's just a very noticeable case, right?
That is notable for sure.
So now let's talk about Bigscreen Beyond 2, now that I've given that real world context of why we did this.
So I'll just run through the device's kind of specs and features, and then Ian, who went hands-on, can tell you all about it, and we'll take questions from the audience. I think that sounds like a good way to do it. So for basic context, if you aren't really aware of what we're talking about here, just like Beyond 1, Bigscreen Beyond 2 and 2E are tethered PC VR headsets that use Steam VR tracking. So that means you will need to plug them in to a PC with a powerful GPU, and you will need to have tracking base stations in your room. One at minimum, realistically at least two, and you can get those from Valve or HTC. You also need to provide your own input device. These don't have hand tracking and they don't come with controllers. So if you want to play kind of, room scale VR stuff, you'll want to get Valve Index controllers. If you want to put this on your flight sim or racing sim rig, you've already got what you need, right? Those are your input devices. So that's the kind of background context. Bigscreen Beyond 1 set records by being the smallest and lightest VR headset you can buy. And I'm not talking about phone holders, they don't count. I mean a VR headset that has real physical displays in it and actually does useful things. So one of the reasons they stated for this at the time for Bigscreen Beyond 1 was that they had the lenses and displays fixed. They made 18 different sizes, 18 different spacings, and then they would send you the one that matched the distance between your eyes, your interpupillary distance, your IPD. So that's what they did with Beyond 1. It was a big part, apparently, of how they were able to make it so small and light. But now with Beyond 2, they've done something remarkable. They've managed to do per eye IPD adjustment while making it 20 grams lighter. So how do they do that, you may ask? Well, they don't have a traditional IPD adjustment mechanism. You're not scrolling a wheel on the bottom of the headset that then moves the displays and lenses apart. Instead, they have this little IPD tool that you screw into each side and use to manually adjust each lens's position horizontally. Now, one of the drawbacks of this is that it doesn't have a sensor, so you have to go and enter that number into the PC tool. It's not like on your headset today where you scroll the wheel and you see a number change. You have to go and match the hardware to the software. But that's really not a huge problem at all, right? That's especially if you're, using this only for yourself as a PC VR enthusiast. You set it up once, you screw these little things into the right position, and you're ready to go. But it also means you have resale value now, right? You can sell this to someone else that can adjust it. If someone's coming over to try your headset, you can measure their IPD with your iPhone and figure out what it is, or use some other tool and get them moved in there. And it also means that if you're like Ian and you have an asymmetric IPD, so the distance between your eyes is different on each side, then that this really, really works for you. So that's the first remarkable thing, adjustable IPD. The next and arguably the biggest upgrade, though, is the lenses. So, as Ian noticed in his Beyond One review, even when you did have the right IPD, Beyond's lenses made a lot of sacrifices to be the smallest headset ever. They didn't have a great wide area of clarity like you get in your Quest 3. The sweet spot wasn't great, and there was a lot of glare that made the use case of watching movies on a virtual cinema screen not exactly fantastic. With Beyond 2, they say they have massively upgraded the lenses, and they now say, according to Bigscreen, these are the best pancake lenses ever. These are the best in any headset. And so Ian went hands-on and he tried them and found that a lot of this to be true. And we'll talk very, very shortly about what Ian thought. But it's not only the area of clarity and sweet spot has been improved, they've also reduced the glare. And the most remarkable thing at all for me is that they've increased the field of view to the point that it's pretty much the same as Quest 3, right? So horizontally, it is the same by their measurement of both. It's 108 degrees. Vertically, it's ever so slightly narrower. So Quest 3 is 99 by their measurement and 96 for Bigscreen Beyond 2. But this is plus or minus a few numbers, right? This is pretty much a field of view of Quest 3 with pretty much the clarity of Quest 3 from a lens perspective in a headset that is a fraction of the size. So auto IPD, sharper and clearer, wider lenses. The next thing that I think is remarkable is that while you will have to do your face scan at launch to get the custom molded face pad, they're also going to release a Bigscreen Beyond 2 halo mount. And this halo mount means that you won't need a face pad at all, or you can get a universal face pad. So even if you don't do an iPhone scan, or you want to be an enterprise company that wants to throw these things on a bunch of different people's heads, when this accessory releases, that means that you no longer have to worry about that. Then the next we're almost done here on describing it. The next thing is that there are two models. Bigscreen Beyond 2 is everything I just described. Bigscreen Beyond 2E is everything I just described, plus eye tracking. And not only eye tracking, they say it is the smallest and lightest eye tracking suite ever that adds only 1 gram to the headset. That is stunning. 1 gram to add eye tracking. And so this also runs on your GPU, so it doesn't tax your CPU like the Vive Pro Eye and some of the Varjo tracking. This is a really efficient NVIDIA CUDA, for those who know what that is, eye tracking solution. Sorry, Darshan has said that something's wrong there. You want to just correct me on what that is, Darshan? 1.05. Okay. I rounded down.
Every matters, David.
The 0.005.
Oh, man.
Okay, Darshan, you got me there. I was worried there that I got something very wrong. Every gram matters, he says. Very, very funny. Thanks for giving me a small heart attack there for a second. But yes, this eye tracking solution runs on your GPU, much more efficient than CPU. At launch, they're planning it to be focused on driving your avatar eyes in VR chat, something that VR chat users really care about. And they're also working with companies like NVIDIA and Valve to get this working for foveated rendering. So foveated rendering won't be there at launch, but that is something that they are working on. And Darshan told me as well that they are heavily focusing on, not heavily focusing, sorry, read the wrong note here. They're exploring measuring your IPD using eye tracking, which would help you, especially if you're, an enterprise company trying to set someone up or something. You can measure their IPD and then do the little bit of adjustment there. So that would be super cool. And Darshan, I wonder if you could also get the software to be automatically set based on that measurement. That would be really, really cool. So Beyond 2 is shipping in April, the first batch. Beyond 2E with eye tracking is shipping in May. It is $1,019 for Beyond 2 and $1,219 for Beyond 2E with eye tracking, so $200 more. Existing Bigscreen Beyond 1 owners can get a $200 discount for a limited time, whatever that means, where they get that $200 discount to upgrade to Beyond 2. And the accessories are backwards compatible, or should I say forwards compatible. So the audio strap from Bigscreen Beyond 1 will work with 2, as will the custom molded pads. So the one this is all, great stuff. The one thing I would say that, some enthusiasts have told me they care about, the upscaling for Bigscreen Beyond is still there. So at 75 hertz mode, this is a native 2560 by 2560 image sent to the headset. Simple enough. But at 90 hertz, they are still using that display stream compression where it's sent at 1920 by 1920 to the headset, where the headset then upscales it to 2560 by 2560. So big screen beyond, if you are focused on fine details like text, if you're focused on clarity and sharpness, you want to be in the 75 hertz mode. Whereas if you're focused on, smoothness and motion clarity, you want to go for the 90 hertz mode. You can see a comparison image of that in our article. So to be clear, these prices do not include the tracking base stations and input devices required. But overall, we'll get now to Ian's impressions as the one who tried it. But my thought is, this is great. They've pretty much, if you're a PC VR enthusiast who doesn't care about base stations and enjoys having your base stations, this is the VR headset to beat. This is the one you want. This is kind of gotten rid of almost all my concerns with Big Screen Beyond 1. And I can't believe they managed to make it lighter while doing this. This is remarkable engineering.
Yeah, remarkable engineering is very, very well said. I specifically told Darshan and Big Screen about my IPD issue. Basically, the center of my eyes are like 1 millimeter different or something like that, or 1.5 millimeters different when measured from center. And you can't really notice it until and then I'm just looking at you wondering if I still love you, right? Like she's just teasing me, right? When you start pointing this out to people. But Darshan thought of me, right? He cared about me, and he built a headset built for my eyeballs, and that's an incredibly it feels good to have been seen. That's part of the reason I made the trip out there, was to see Big Screen, right? Like I know that they had seen me in this design, and I wanted them to know that I see them coming out in this design. So that's part of why we kind of pulled out all the stops to turn this coverage around very quickly. And our audience out there can see me in my first moments with this headset, where I utter wow. Okay, I say wow, and I included that in the audio clip. And you can see me transport to VR in that video clip, right, live with their hardware, right? He's inches from my face, and he's talking to me, and I cannot hear him because I've got their audio strap inside my ears. And I transported that quickly. You watch me assemble these pieces that they've got, the magnetic faceplate, and you plug in the cord to the computer, and then you attach the audio strap to the sides. They just click into place, and then you position the earpieces right over, right? It's such a premium, different feel. Like you feel the moment you start clipping this all together, like, oh, Big Screen is thinking differently about the amount of money and my value to them as a customer than other manufacturers in this market. Oh, this is a premium, high-end feel. And so last week we had coverage of VR chat. They added this is my genuine first time face that I made. That it's there's nothing more awkward than having someone start changing the position of your eyeball directly on your face. And so, it's like I'm trying to take the tool away from him as quickly as I can so that I can manage my own eyeball's position while inside VR. And sure enough, you start screwing the little tool, and your eyeball turns, your eyeball moves right in front of you. Just phenomenally cool engineering, and a first of its kind to my eyes. I've never seen anything like it. I asked if there was a patent out there, if they had filed on this idea, and I got a not direct answer on that subject. So if it's come up in the comments, I would love to see. But let us know if you're attempting to patent this, or who specifically designed this mechanism, because it deserves all the praise in the world.
Yeah, it's truly brilliant. And Onikazi asking, can you adjust the IPD independently for each eye? Yes, that is the advantage here. One of the advantages, as well as the weight. Yes. Other people asking, is the audio strap compatible with the Halo mount? And Darshan is replying that yes, it does. I would love to see a picture of that, right? Because we know what the Halo mount looks like. We know what the audio strap looks like. What do these two things look like together? I think that would be for me like the ultimate PC VR headset there, actually. Um, I don't. Bigscreen has said this themselves that they don't think that like the complete experience. They think the complete experience is the headset plus the audio strap. They said that for Beyond One, and I have to agree. Those off-ear speakers are great. The design there is great. The ergonomics. Uh, Apparently it's in the trailer that they've posted now, an image of that. We'll have a look at that after the show. We've just dropped in straight into the show after this was announced, pretty much.
Yeah, and so he just responded to my question out there saying that we designed it, we do all of this internally, but we don't comment on patents publicly, but also patents are dumb. So I appreciate that nuanced and not so nuanced, but also nuanced take on patents. Um, and I appreciate Mr. Mycelium's comment. That's the reaction when you go into VR chat and see a 10-foot furry with jiggle physics. Yeah, 100%. And this is the headset to go do that in. Period. Right. Go to Resonite. Go to VR chat. This is the headset made for you. And that's what I was getting at with the VR chat last week. Right. They announced webcam-based selfie mode as a beta feature, along with dolly cams and all these other great features. But you put on the Bigscreen Beyond and you point your webcam from your laptop to get the facial expressions. You can imagine you get the E for the eye tracking unit, and then you go get a whole bunch of trackers, and you're now the jiggle furry of your dreams, and you're ready to go. This is the headset. No, yeah, this is what you do.
Yeah, I mean, from your impressions, from what I can see about the design and the engineering here, unless there is some giant design flaw that we'll only find out during the review, this seems like this is the PC VR headset of choice now. This is what you go for if if you have the money to spend, if you can afford this, and this is what you're willing to spend. I can't see anyone, like, if they're just doing PC VR and they don't care about standalone, picking anything else for now, unless there's something coming on the market that I don't know about.
Yeah, it's fascinating to think. Okay, you might want to go if you've got two base stations, maybe go get a couple backups so that you've got a nice supply. One of the things that I was asking Darshan about was whether that webcam system that I just described could be used for simple 6-DoF tracking. I would love to have my computer pointed at me or a webcam on my computer pointed at me. And if all of my movements are rotational, up and down, maybe 3 inches back and forth or up and down. Are those movements slow enough that you could do it with a webcam or with a pair of webcams like the good old Oculus sensors? But I can't use the base stations, and I have to honor those people in our audience who are just really interesting work, big screen, but I'm not in the market for base stations right now. What is that path for them if they should get this particular hardware? Do they wait on Big Screen Beyond too? Or do they upgrade? Is there an upgrade path for them? What does it look like for that kind of use case that I'm describing? Anything out there in the comments that we should
Yeah,
talk about?
here it is on screen now. The setup that they have posted on their website, the Halo mount and the audio strap. For me, this is it. This is what you want. If money is no object and you just want the best PC VR setup, maybe you've got your sim racing rig, your flight sim rig, or your VR chat user, or whatever it is you use PC VR for. Yeah, this is it for me.
Yeah, and you can imagine just what the other flip side of this. I just talked about the webcam option. What if you put a little webcam or a very, very small sensor on that somewhere to provide inside-out tracking? But we want it. People are ready for it. I think our audiences, their appetites are whetted a little bit for this potentially being in their future. We couldn't really make that recommendation on the first one because of the fit issues. It's very hard. Like, it was a beautiful idea, and I understood why they did it. But they made a whole bunch of different sizes for Big Screen Beyond One, and what that meant was if you have someone with a dramatically different face shape in your house with you, you really can't share the headset one to the other. It's just a huge pain to do so. Well, this incredible engineering work that they've done to reposition each of these directly in front of your eyeballs lets you, it fits so perfectly with the idea that, oh, I'm going to go let him play with Half-Life Alyx or my flights or my sim game for 2 hours. You can just go, Johnny, go drive the car, right? Like, and so it's just screw the two displays into the right spot and you're good to go. I'll say this to anyone that is in the VR chat community, in the Resonite community, in the simulator community, doing interesting, unexpected things in those communities. Email tips@uploadvr.com. We want to hear about what you're doing. This is one of those, this is a big, big, big idea, a big market. I asked him out there whether he thinks he could get 10x the number of units sold with Bigscreen Beyond 2 compared to Bigscreen Beyond 1 because of the difference in IPD and shift, and whether it would follow the same thing that we saw from Quest 1 to Quest 2, whether the shift would look. He said no. He was like, he backed off of that. He's not expecting that kind of uptick. But I have to wonder whether it can still achieve it.
Yeah, so what a lot of our audience are saying here is that, for them, the Achilles heel is still the base stations. I'm seeing this over and over again in our comments. It's what I've seen from day one, whether it be Bigscreen Beyond 1 or Bigscreen Beyond 2 and 2E. So what I wonder is, and I'm sure Darshan is not ready to talk about 3, given that he has just announced 2 and hasn't even shipped it yet. What I wonder is that the next step? Of course, on this show, we're always going to speculate on what is the next step. Do you get inside-out tracking added to these? Not wireless. I'm not talking about standalone or wireless. I'm just talking about taking away that need for base stations, putting in 2 cameras, even if we're just talking about, you want to put this in your sim racing setup, but you don't care about controller volume. Maybe 4 cameras for, track controllers. Maybe there's different variants. I wonder if that is oh wow, we have a comment here from Darshan about the sales volume of 2 so far. Let's read that out.
Wow, I laughed at you when you said that, but we've already sold more Bigscreen 2 in the first 3 hours than we sold in the first month of Beyond 1. So congratulations on those sales figures. Please let us know if that trend continues. We would love to report those figures out, and we have the audience that wants to hear those numbers. So beautiful to share with us. Thank you.
Yeah, so that's very, very interesting there, Darshan. And yes, please do give us those numbers. We'd love to chart in public to our audience and our viewers what how Bigscreen Beyond's VR enthusiast focused strategy is working. But yeah, I do wonder for 3 if you can add some cameras on this. And everyone has always said, well, then it would get too heavy. But people said that about IPD adjustment, and Bigscreen figured it out. People said that about eye tracking, and Bigscreen figured it out with 1.05 grams. Not 1 gram, folks, 1.05 grams. You got to make sure to note that. But they figured it out. If I think that the same team that figured that out, I'm pretty bullish that they could do that. And Darshan in our comments is saying there will be a Beyond 3 and a Beyond 4. But what will be in it? Way too early to tell. I'm sure that's the case, of course. You haven't even shipped Beyond 2 yet. But you're talking about that 10x, Ian, and what can it take to 10x a headset like this? I do think inside out is the step you need there.
Yep, 100%. So that's but I still think like maybe they got 10x here. Maybe they could get 100x with that. And honestly, just when you have a nice graphics card and you have a nice lightweight headset, David and I are well over 2 hours here on our stream, and both our heads are aching. We don't complain about it week to week. It's just part of doing our job. Right? Like my head hurts, and it's because I spent over 2 hours in this Quest headset, and not a Bigscreen Beyond being a big part of it.
So we have another comment here from Darshan. We're getting really good at cameras. See our eye tracking. I'll leave it at that. But when? I don't know. No way it will be in 2025. Even 2026, I don't know. So what I'm hearing, Darshan, is 2027. That's what I'm hearing.
All right. Well, we have a couple ideas from Meta on our multi-year timelines in our head, right? We're zeroing in on the 5-year timeline here that they had suggested for the wristbands to be productized. We're getting close to that. There's the avatars there, the photorealistic avatars that they have had in the shop, in their research facilities, but they haven't been able to actually put into hardware. And this is just, I have to say, I have to speak for the VR community a little bit out there, right? Andrew Bosworth had his time during this show where we read out his comments on that site that I don't understand why you guys are still on there, but he has his comments on that site, and then we have to give space and space to the idea that VR is still pulling through as its own thing. It doesn't actually need the bulk of the Apple platform, the bulk of the Meta platform. It can be just this. And it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing that your friends don't understand, the people that like your obsession, you're watching cartoons on the internet for 2 hours talk about the future of technology, and none of them can understand it because this turns people into cartoons, and it's freaking awesome because you go to places you never could be otherwise, right? Like the story you all ingest and understand is made easier to understand by this hardware. And it's phenomenal that this moment has come to pass. That's why we expended a Bigscreen Beyond worth of airtime through the over the United States, going to San Francisco and back, was to assess this for you. And I'm just going to leave this on here that, right, we never have praised something to this degree prior to getting the review out, and we have to qualify our praise here by saying we have to spend days and hours inside this headset to provide you a proper review of this hardware. And that won't happen until they're shipping production units at scale to everyone else. So we want to take one of those units that they take off they're shipping out to everyone else. We want to take one of those. I want it to go to David Heaney in London, and I want him to spend a couple weeks with it. And then he comes back and says, Ian, you said too much about the clarity of the lenses. Ian, you were right about this. You were wrong about this. And if you're holding on to a couple $1,000s out there trying to make a decision, wait for that. This is the same process where we've gone through with Immersed. And, right, they are not at the same stage that Bigscreen Beyond is. You can go find our coverage of Immersed, in which David Heaney went and tried out the best demo they could muster for him. Ian Hamilton went out and tried the best demo that Immersed could muster for him. And you can read our write-ups of those things, in which we do not recommend even considering going near a place of spending money on that hardware. Compare the tone of what I just said to how we are talking about big screen. That is the reality of this hardware. That is the reality of putting this thing on, getting a wow effect, transporting instantaneously to a virtual theater in which I'm locked in. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing that they've done, but it's still, we have to go and do part 2 of this analysis, and that's your in-depth, multi-week time with the device. And then we have a big write-up, a couple thousand words, where he is breaking it down extensively. So please come back to us when we get that time. Keep in mind, everything I've said praising this thing is still just first impressions, but you can compare my first impressions here to my first impressions of the Immersed headset, and you can see how real this should feel to you.
Yeah, and we should obviously point out that Bigscreen, this isn't a first-time hardware company anymore. They're now an established hardware company. They have a record with Bigscreen Beyond 1. They did have some delays on shipping. It's obviously a lot more complicated to do fixed IPD that you send out to people. You can see our coverage on that. I want to point out a donation from Parmesan. Thank you so much for the $10. And Parmesan says, Thank you for being one of the best parts of my week. Superb journalism. Love you guys. And yep, feeling right back to you. Love you, Parmesan. Thank you so much for the $10 donation. We love having these discussions with you every week. We move our schedules around to make sure that we have these discussions with you every week. We work later on these days to make sure that we have these discussions with you because we really do love hearing your thoughts and love discussing this technology and this industry with all of you.
Geek Odin out there saying, don't compare those two companies seriously. Fair words from the creator of Virtual Desktop regarding the difference between Immersed and Bigscreen. So that's not us saying that. That is the creator of Virtual Desktop saying that. And you have the video evidence in front of you showing that I put this on. I was transported. I got locked in. The IPD adjustment worked. Everything else about the praise of this hardware is going to wait. I see Darshan saying he's ready to ship one out. Norm looks like he's getting ready for it. I will just caution again in this flow of excitement that we've built here now, this little hype train we have jumped on, even though we try not to jump on hype trains. We want production. We want the units you're shipping to backers, or not to backers, to buyers, right off the assembly line, not a pre-production thing, and so that David can say this is the experience that we can expect for buyers at home after they've spent a couple weeks with it. So appreciate this dynamic discussion with our audience, the incredible comments out. I think we, with people out there watching us in Antarctica, with the idea that we had with Darshan talking with him, where there are people at NASA using this, there are people who are going to be flying planes and training to be all sorts of professionals in the real world using headsets like this. Those are stories we want UploadVR to be able to tell, to bring you. We've done some of those stories in the past. Hit us up at tips@uploadvr.com if you're using VR in these unusual ways. If you see a big vertical of people in the future doing this, we want to talk to you. We want to tell those stories. And we thank Darshan for inviting us for this demo, and can't wait to see what's next from Bigscreen.
Yeah, and I think, as you say, when it comes to those enterprise and government use cases, this Halo mount is going to be really critical for that because it's going to have this universal face pad that can be just shared between people. So all you have to do there is use the tool to adjust the IPD and put that into the software. And then hopefully in future, they can even kind of guide that with the eye tracking as well. So, again, we need to note that for the 2E, the eye tracking at launch in May, they say, will only be for kind of social VR chat, and they're still working to try and figure out how do you get foveated rendering, because on PC, it's not immediately obvious, like how do you get that to be supported in every title? Is it something that developers have to implement and then it only works in that title? Or is there a way you can work at the driver level with NVIDIA, from what I understand, is kind of what Bigscreen is hinting at, exploring here to maybe say, if we have Valve and NVIDIA on board, SteamVR's maker and the GPU's maker, can we figure out something there? And hopefully they can, because then that makes the 2E even more appealing than not just for VR chat users, but for sim users, because they really demand that dynamic foveated rendering. They care about that. They will pay for a headset that gives it. And here's Darshan saying, hopefully no dev work needed. So the hopefully in there makes clear that, this is something they're exploring. They've said this is their big roadmap focus on the software side for 2025. How do we get that eye tracking to do more than just the social VR stuff?
So as we close out this show, I just want to shout out to my team here. I think they're the best in the business, and we came together this week as a team, despite the incredible stress of traveling through the physical world and trying to meet up with everyone at GDC. It is such a double-edged sword. The intense social, suddenly, you've spent 6 months of your life locked in a room, away from social interaction with other people, and then boom, you're dropped into a conference, meeting with people and having to cover the very latest in the news. I met two of my coworkers. I met Henry Stockdale for the first time this week. I met Don Hopper for the first time. Look for them at conferences. I'm not going to be traveling much this year, but I do want David Heaney to travel for upcoming ones. I've made the pitch out there that he's ready to come out there and do some assessments of hardware if we have any other unexpected things pop up this year. I want to make that pitch out there to become a member or a patron at uploadvr.com support the work that we do directly, help me grow this team, help us grow this team. David has, David is the best hardware reporter in the business when it comes to VR technology, and I need 5 Davids, and you can help us hire people like that in the future by supporting us. So thank you for your support. We'll see you in the future.
Thank you so much, and thanks to Ian for getting that really quick turnaround. He saw that Beyond 2 was ready to be seen. He got onto the plane. He just went there. There was no delay. It was, I'm going to go get this. And go to uploadvr.com and read Ian's impressions of Beyond 2. We had that coverage right there from GDC. And as Ian said, you can expect some great games coverage from Don Hopper and Henry Stockdale in the coming days and week, as well as on the VR Gamescast podcast on Tuesday, where they will dig into GDC, because I don't want to give anything away, but they have got some juicy stories. They've been talking to developers. They've been trying things. And these are the developers that are in the cutting edge of how do you use all this hardware and tech we're talking about to make really great games. So I'm excited to see that. And I hope you all are too.
Yeah,
Thanks so much,
absolutely.
everyone. We'll see you in the future.